the noon. So we said we would share this with them and they could watch it at their convenience. So that this will be available on our YouTube channel after the session today, and then we will send it with an email for all y'all with additional follow-up information from the presentation. As you all know, Florida and Cuba has a rich shared history, and Havana can tell us amazing stories about that shared history, its unique culture, and historic preservation. For over 10 years, the Florida Trust actually has been taking groups to Cuba. Some of you may have been on those trips. I know for sure one of you have. But this is the first time that we have been headed back since COVID. Actually, we had to cancel one of our trips because of COVID. So we are so proud to now be partnering with Sage Lewis and Project Pour More, who are really leaders in educational travel and have rich experience in going to Cuba and leading groups in Cuba, including, I think, as recently as last week, they were in Havana. So as we go through Sage's presentation, please remain muted unless you have a question you would like to ask during the Q&A. And please reserve questions until then. However, you can type your question into the chat at any time, and we will get to as many of those as possible. And just a reminder that our Lunch and Learn series is a free educational program we share with everyone. A special thanks to Project Pour More for making today's event happen. The generous support of our sponsors allows us to continue providing educational programs and further our work to support Florida's history and heritage. So with that sort of housekeeping out of the way, I'd like to give the opportunity for Sage, our presenter today, to introduce himself and maybe share your screen and get started.
Hi, everyone. Great to meet you. Thank you so much for coming. Let me get my screen here. All right. Let's see. I th Hopefully, you're all seeing this light blue slide.
Looks good.
Okay, great. My name is Sage. I'm the founder of Project Pour More. We're uh, a tour operator that has been very involved in the Cuban arts and culture and travel since 2005. And uh, we have been, we do about 8 to 10 specialized tours a year, and really specialize in the getting really kind of inside the soul of Cuba through the arts, through people-to-people exchange, a lot of interaction and insider experience with a lot of the most interesting people in Havana and throughout Cuba, and the projects they're doing. They're kind of the really inspiring things that are happening there. Anyways, I'll go into that as we go, but I just wanted to go to my I just say we're very excited for this collaboration with the Florida Trust for historic preservation. Architecture and preservation is one of the areas we've specialized in Cuba. Partly for the reason is you just can't avoid architecture when you go to Cuba. Uh, you'll see when when you're there, if you go on this trip with us, that Havana is one of the great cities of the world in terms of architecture. And one thing that's very interesting um, about Havana and Cuba is that it's one of the rare places where a lot of the original architecture, which comes from many periods, the colonial period with Spain, as well as modern architecture, early 20th century, a lot of buildings between 1900 and 1959, and a lot of eclectic architecture they're still there. I mean, they didn't go through what most cities went through, where they tore down old buildings to build new buildings. They just kept them because, various reasons, and those are things we'll get into on the tour of why. I'm sure a lot of you know is that you've seen in pictures of Havana, a lot of those buildings are sadly crumbling because they don't have the maintenance and the economic power and ability to restore them, and they have a very, very different system for all this stuff. And so they're sadly losing a lot of them, but they're also have a good effort in preserving many of them as well. So while they're losing, a lot of buildings every year, they're also preserving a lot of buildings, and they're going through and choosing which ones are most highest priority. Anyways, I might be going on some tangents as I talk as we go through the structure here, but I as I think of things. But going back to what I was saying about what we do is um, we are well, we've been doing this since 2005, but we officially founded in 2007. In 2005, we organized a huge film shoot in Cuba, and we specialize in Cuba as well as Iceland, and we our philosophy is that you can't just organize tours all over the world. The world's way too big, and each place is way too deep in what it has to offer. So we just really got to know Cuba because we also, I went to Cuba first time in 1999 and caught this bug of uh, fascination for the country for many reasons. I'm a composer and first was there because I really love the music, but then that just took me into um, discovering that their literature is outstanding. They've got great films. They've got a very vibrant theater scene. They've got incredible dance. They have, and within music, there's classical music and Latin music and all the jazz music and all this stuff. And so it just kind of never ended. The more I would learn about the country, the more I would go, the more fascinating it became, and trying to understand the history about it. Um, so this tour that we're doing is support for the Cuban People Tour, and I'll talk more about the legality of traveling to Cuba right now, how it works, and what's changed, what hasn't changed. Um, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but this trip is licensed as a support for the Cuban people. And that's how we're able with the embargo to travel to Cuba and on the type of program that we have, which is educational, has high interaction with the Cuban people, and also has is providing a lot of much needed support in Cuba right now to the private sector, to the small entrepreneurs and artists and people who are figuring out how to live and survive and thrive outside of the government programs, which is what the embargo is on. So this trip is really all about exploring Havana. Since this is a trip, this isn't it's not an extensive trip where we're going to be spending 10 days traveling all over the island, seeing, the countryside, smaller cities, towns, everything. This is really about Havana, which is, a neighbor to Florida. It's 90 miles from uh, the Florida Keys, and that's a very short distance. And so it's just right there, and it's a um, y- you could spend months in Havana. I mean, I've spent years in Havana, and I'm always discovering new things, and always having, it's kind of an infinite city in a lot of ways. And so it's also really easy. It's so easy for you guys to get to, really more than anyone else in the world. I live in Los Angeles. I've been based here for 20 years, and I wish I could just get to Cuba on a 50-minute flight, which is all it takes for coming from Miami. And there's also flights from Tampa Bay as well. So it's just really easy to get to. So the overview of this tour is, of course, it's architecture. And that's not all we're going to do because there's other things to see, but that's about half of what the focus is going to be on. And it's on October 24th through 28th of this year, um, with 5 days and 4 nights. And we're going to be diving deep into exploring Cuba's rich architectural heritage, its vibrant culture, and the unique connections specifically between Florida and Cuba. And I don't know, if you guys probably are aware, but I know a lot of people, especially those who don't live in Cuba or Florida, are aware that for 7 years, the British had captured Cuba from Spain, and Spain also had colonized Florida. This and in 1763, they decided it didn't make sense for Spain to have Florida and England to have Cuba when they own the rest of the continents, in reverse. And so they traded Cuba and Florida, so that the British could have Florida and the Spanish could have Cuba. And so that's just something that still remains in the history, and it's just it's you see the influences of from that period and the two regions of the colonization from the other European country. And since then, there's just been before the Cuban Revolution, Cuba was the most visited place for Americans to go to on vacation outside of the US. So Florida and Cuba are kind of an extension of each other in terms of um, beautiful beaches, great nightlife, tropical weather, culture, all that stuff. So there's just a lot of history. Of course, in recent, well, not even that recent at this point, 60 or more years, with the Cuban Revolution and the embargo on Cuba, there's been a great separation and isolation, but it's one of the things, at least for me, the rewarding parts of traveling to Cuba is seeing how intertwined our cultures are in a lot of ways, how much we have in common, and how there's still like this affinity. Cubans love American culture and they love Americans coming to Cuba. And it's very rewarding to kind of restore these old links between our people in our regions, and you'll feel that for sure when you're there as well. Cubans treat us, uh, they're so friendly, very curious. They're very smart and talented people, and they're interesting to talk to. They're insightful, and they're very hospitable and welcoming. So that's definitely something that everyone who goes on at least the tours that we organize, but I think just in general who goes to Cuba feels that and almost always comments on that either while they're there or when they get back. Um, so this tour has been closely designed by the Florida Trust. Together, we've had many conversations, gone through many variations of itineraries. What would be most interesting to the Florida Trust community, and really figured out and I think nailed what's the perfect Florida Trust experience of Cuba. So I would expect something similar to all the other high quality programs you've experienced with the Florida Trust, but with the context of Cuba and what that offers. And the deadline to sign up for this trip is July 9th, but I would encourage uh, you to register as soon as possible because spaces are limited. And we already have a, a nice group going. And it's so yeah, I would sign up soon and we'll give more information on that. Some more highlights, getting back to the architectural side. Cuba's filled with UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Old Havana, or how they called Havana Vieja, and they call it the Four Plazas, but there's actually six plazas or more, depending on how you choose to count them or define what a plaza is. Um, and that's the region of Cuba that's surrounded with fortifications because Cuba was the most important jewel of the Spanish crown during the colonial years because as they took the Gulf Stream when the ships would come from Spain, Cuba was almost always the first stop after crossing the Atlantic, where the ships would go into the Havana has a perfect port and a perfect location where they would repair the ships, refuel, rest, and do anything else they needed to do before traveling on to the Argentina or Mexico or any other part of Latin America. So it was really the hub, Havana, the name Havana. There's different theories of what it means, but the most widely believed theory is that Havana means hub, and that's why it is has these old forts built all around it because pirates were constantly trying to attack, and so was England and the Dutch and the French and Portuguese. Everyone wanted Havana because it was filled with ships that were filled with treasures coming back from the Americas, and it was filled with it was a strategic location, and it was just a very wealthy city, which is why the architecture is so extraordinary. So, Old Havana was surrounded by a big, huge wall protecting it, and so it's very densely built on the inside because there's limited space within these walls, and surrounding the walls, there's old forts everywhere, which Morro and La Cabaña are the names of them. We'll be visiting those. And then there's once Cuba was formed as a republic, as an independent country, they brought the walls down and it expanded where the capital was built, and the most grandiose buildings around 1900 were all built. And That's another area we're going to look at closely. And then there's the modern architecture in the neighborhood of Velado, which is now uh, consider their downtown. It's a more central area where most people work and most things happen. And we're gonna visit. There's beautiful mansions there that we're gonna visit. One of them is by Pamela Ruiz, who's a Cuban American who moved back to Cuba and restored this house beautifully. It's got a big New York Times, no, sorry, New York Magazine article about it, and it's one of the most beautiful houses I've ever been in terms of design and architecture, and so we'll go there for mojitos. We'll be having mojitos all over the place, and it's all very, and then we're also staying in beautifully restored mansions, which are boutique hotels, which have about 10 rooms each. We've got two of them, which are my favorites, and they're hard to get. La Reserva Vedado and El Claxon, they're in the Vedado district, which is they were built I think around 1920, and have been restored in the past 10 years, and are now these private hotels, which also helps fulfill our support for the Cuban people travel license. And it's also uh, especially for an architectural theme, but just in general, I think the nicest place is to stay when you're in Havana. Each room is unique; it's a little bit different, but uh, they're very consistently very high quality, very luxurious, very charming, and beautifully done. Each room has a different theme, and the two hotels are just a block from each other. So we'll have 20 rooms, and we'll have both the whole hotels to ourselves, and they have both amazing restaurants. So incredible breakfast included every day, and then if great bar and courtyards to spend time together. There's a few hours of leisure time every afternoon. And it's just a really nice place to be when we're not on our program. They also, of course, have air conditioning, Wi-Fi, daily housekeeping, a full-time staff, and pretty much everything you could want other than a swimming pool or a gym. It's not that kind of hotel because they're like being bed and breakfast. It's more of that category. Um, Here's just some pictures of things been talking about. This is one of the hotels. Here's another one, what they look like from the front. And then here's a couple of the plazas that we'll see. The plazas have been really well restored. And then This is a Museum of Decorative Arts, which is we'll be visiting too, and all the places we go to, we have local specialists who will be giving us guided tours these places. And then this is one of the fortifications here called El Morro. And so we will be meeting with many local experts as a combination of some presentations. One, for example, in the Ludwig Foundation, which is an arts foundation, where Wilfredo Benitez, who's an architectural historian and gives a very interesting and comprehensive overview of the history of architecture of Havana and why it developed in the way it did with the different styles and the different periods and the different codes and laws and, uh, and all the way to today. Hemingway's house, of course, you can't miss. You've probably, I know you've all seen the Hemingway's house in Florida. Um, the one in Havana is it's a really interesting place. It's similar in a lot of ways to his house in Florida. Cuba's where he spent most of his time, if between all his locations where he lived, and he wrote many books there, and he also won the Nobel Literature Prize there that he also donated to the Cuban people as a gift. And so he has a lot of history in Cuba. Um, and his estate, at which was is called Finca Vigía, is now a museum, and it's about 15 minutes outside the city. Um, so we also have some artists studios we're going to visit, and then another thing that's pretty unique is that one thing that we do, Project Pour More, is uh, my company, is that we also have a nonprofit organization called Havana Light, where we restore neon signs throughout Havana. My partner Adolfo Nodal is expert in neon sign restoration and has restored thousands of old neon signs around Los Angeles, as well as in Havana. And so, in partnership with our friend Kadir Lopez, who's a well-known Cuban artist, who some of the themes of his work is finding old signs, not necessarily neon ones, but just old signs from before uh, the Cuban Revolution and then turning them into pieces of art. He also does that with neon and has a neon studio. And Havana used to be, in many ways, like Miami and other parts of Florida, um, neon everywhere in the 50s. It was called the City of Light or the Paris of the Caribbean, because there was just neon everywhere. Most of that's gone, but some of it's still there. And so Havana Light has been going through and doing beautiful restorations of the neon that remains. And so Kadir has a beautiful house, which is also the neon restoration workshop. And also his one of his art galleries. So we're gonna have a dinner party there with artists and a really great buffet and live music and this beautiful courtyard and gallery that's just filled with these old neon signs. So that's a pretty cool like niche within architectural preservation that we're especially involved in and excited to share that with you. And then there's also the Columbus or Colon, called in Spanish cemetery, where is like an open air museum. It's a very uh, famous museum that is kind of in a lot of ways similar to the Père Lachaise Museum in Paris or the St. Louis Museum in New Orleans. Sorry, St. Louis Cemetery in New Orleans. And so we're going to visit that and get a guided tour as well as uh, journaling in the cemetery, which is one of Florida Trust's programs. And then there's other things are the Partagas cigar factory we're going to visit, which is, as you well know, Cuba's famous for its cigars, and partly because they have a perfect climate for cigars and just the soil and all the conditions for growing tobacco, as well as their supposed secrets for how they not just grow the tobacco but roll them. And it's in a beautiful old cigar factory, and the team of people still goes there and does it the way they did it 100 years ago. The only difference is before they would have what they call a lector who would go there and read either the newspaper or novels. Now they will just put on a TV or a podcast or something like that. But that's really interesting thing to see as well. This is what that cigar factory we're going to see looks like from the outside. Over here is Hemingway's house, and this is Pamela Ruiz house, who I was mentioning. Right down here on the left corner is part of the courtyard for the party at the Neon workshop, where we're going to be having. This is the Colon Cemetery in the middle, and then over here on the right is another one of the plazas from Old Havana. Another important part when we're not focusing as much on the architecture and preservation is food is a very important aspect. You could call this a food tour if you wanted to, or a restaurant tour, because we will be visiting some of the best restaurants, Cuban food. I know you have it all over Florida as well, but it's a little bit different in Cuba. And just like, I live in LA and we've got great Mexican food, but it's when I go to Mexico, it just, for some reason, it's just the tacos are even better than the ones here in LA. And so it's kind of like that with Cuba. And they've had a restaurant scene, which is they call them paladares, which it means in Spanish for palate. And they're really interesting because they're all made in old homes. They don't have big restaurant franchises or businesses in Cuba. So anyone who starts a restaurant, it has to be a small run family business. They just really started out in the beginning in the 90s as you'd walk into their home, they'd have their dining room table, maybe three tables or so, and you just eat a simple meal. And that grew to become turning their biggest old mansions into these restaurants. And they're very creative. They're done very high quality, and they're a lot of fun to eat at. So we'll be enjoying that. And the other cool thing is all the settings are really interesting, and also inside of the topic of preservation, because they're in these beautiful old, really interesting homes that have been well restored in different creative ways. So it's also their private businesses, so that also helps the guidelines of support for the Cuban people travel. The other thing you can't miss when you go to Cuba is live music. Cuba has one of the healthiest jazz circuits. Uh, you could easily argue in the world right now, comparable to other cities that have great jazz. And so we definitely don't want to miss that. They've got a new thing they're doing where they have these rooftop jazz clubs. So you're on the top of a most of them are old homes or residential buildings, and then they have beautiful views of the city at night. They have a killer jazz ensemble playing, great drinks, and under the stars and fresh air. It's a pretty delightful place to spend a couple of hours. And then yet another thing that you can't miss when you go to Cuba are the classic cars, another very fascinating topic of preservation because I want to say almost half the cars in Cuba are from the 40s and 50s. They're old American cars. And they have convertibles, they have regular cars, Buicks, Fords, Chevys, Studebakers, Pontiacs. They're a lot of fun and they're amazing how they keep these things going. And so we're definitely gonna take an hour and do a scenic drive where we get 10 cars for the group and get to experience that as well. So there's just a lot of uh, people to people, meaningful interactions with locals and really understanding the country. And there's here's some more pictures. The cars over here on the bottom right. This is one of the greatest restaurants, La Guarida, where they have a rooftop jazz series, which we're gonna go to called La Guarida Sessions on Friday night. This is this amazing arts complex called the Fábrica de Arte Cubano, the Cuban Art Factory, where it's a lot of visual art and performance. And then another Cuban restaurant called Chef Ivan Justo. There's, I encourage you, I went through kind of a summarized version of the itinerary. I encourage you. I'm just gonna show this real fast. I don't want to run out of time for questions, but this is actually, here's the itinerary, and it breaks down the whole everything we do, so you know exactly what we're going to be doing by the hour, and has a description and pictures of everything we're going to do everywhere we go, and you get a really good sense of what the experience is going to be like. So I'm just kind of scrolling through this. You can just kind of take it in by looking at the pictures, but if you want to read anything closely, you can do that. And there's a lot of interesting information in there. Every day we'll start at around 10 in the morning, um, around 10, sometimes 9:30, sometimes 10:30, and then we go till around 3:30 or 4 with a few activities and then in a lunch. Then we come back to the hotels for a few hours to rest. Then we go out for dinner and some kind of evening activity as well. So, um, anyways, the links are. I'm gonna go back to my slideshow. The links are here, and I think uh, we can put them in the chat too, and so if you want to click on it. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about travel and planning tips. Going to Cuba takes a lot of planning. We do all that for you, but there is certain things that we will help you um, on your own in terms of what to pack. You're gonna we don't include the airfare because we end up getting people coming from many different places and people have different uh, airlines that they prefer or like to go first class or like to use miles, and so it's easier to leave that up to you. We meet you at the we give you all types of guidance on how to what flights to pick, which ones to choose, and then everything you need to know through. We'll do an online orientation like this, kind of, but we'll really be going over how to prepare for your trip. And then we have a whole series of emails that we will be sending you on different topics of getting ready for the trip logistically, and also just the more fun part, which is just being excited about the travel experience. Really great Cuban books to read, great Cuban films, uh, by Cuban artists and writers or by Americans or other foreigners about Cuba to get an outside perspectives. And uh, so and good documentaries and things to kind of understand Cuba, and it all enriches your trip once you're there. If you've been thinking about it and learning about it before and after the trip, all the legal documentation we provide, the Cuban visas, the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, general license, and all the documents you need to make the trip. Um, another we've just another I'm sure there's some of you that might have questions. Well, how is travel to Cuba changing right now with the new administration, many changes in US foreign policy, and so just a few things about that. I guess the first thing I'd like to say is that so far, not much has changed. Travel in Cuba is still the same as it's been for um, eight over 8 years. There was a whole bunch of changes in the laws that happened right away when Trump became president in his first term that Biden never changed, and now with Trump again, they haven't changed. So we're still going under the same rules for eight that we've had for over 8 years. The same visas, all the flights are the same airlines, the same itinerary rules, and I think what's all that's changed is that if there were ever a time to travel with purpose, now would be the time. The sentiment, I think, has changed. Cuba's um, is one of the safest countries in the Americas. I think statistically, in terms of crime, it has the second lowest crime rates after Canada. So it's a great place to go to in terms of safety. Also, uh, things like you don't need special vaccines for Cuba. Tropical diseases are very low and under control there. Um, and so, but Cuban people are struggling more than they have been right now. Their economy is in worse shape, and they, because of the pandemic and because of the U.S. foreign policy on Cuba, and because of bad decisions that have been made by their government and economists with inflation and so forth. Uh, they really need um, tourism right now, and they really appreciate it. And Cuba probably is going to change a lot. I think the policy is going to change, and their government's going to change. It's at a point where it just has to, and so I'd say go now because you're seeing this very interesting time capsule. It's like going in a time machine. It's almost feels like going to another planet, and it's so close. And It's not going to be like that for much longer. I don't think, and I think most experts don't think it's going to be. Cubans don't think that either. So, for all its highs and its lows, it's a fascinating country. It's a fun country. It's a meaningful country to visit, and the time is ticking. So I would say this year would be a great time to go to Cuba. Um, and if things do change and all of a sudden there's a new policy on Cuba, they change the categories of legal travel under the Office of Foreign Assets Control. Um, we'll adjust accordingly. If we have to cancel the tour, we will, of course, issue a full refund. Um, we also recommend travel insurance, which we will give you all types of tips for in case there's like a last, like if the trip gets canceled because of a legal change that happens after I wait. I don't. Hold all the money that people pay for the trip in an escrow account and don't pay it. Don't send anything to Cuba until a month before the trip. So that, within a month before the trip, um, many insurance policies have it's CFAR, cancel for any reason insurance, which will with its within that time where we've already spent a lot of the money and have for some reason can't get it back a month before the trip, we will it covers any loss. So but before that, we would give a full refund. And I just got back from a trip. Um, I got back on March 31st with 123 high school students that I took to Cuba for. It was a high school a band, choir, and orchestra, and they went to Cuba and had an exchange with a Cuban music school, music high school in Havana, and it was a slam dunk, amazing experience. This high school goes everywhere. They go on a trip every year, and they said the teachers who organized it said this was the best travel experience they've ever had in their entire travel program. And we've done, we have a trip coming up next month, and we've had a big trip for the Jazz Festival in January. We had a big trip in December. And every one of the trips we've had recently have been some of the best trips we've ever had to Cuba in terms of what the travelers have said after the trip, and as well as during the trip. So, you know, there's uh, there's not risk in going. I wouldn't worry about it. And if things change, we will do the right thing and make sure that we're not gonna um, go to a country that's gonna not be as good of a place to visit as it is right now and has been as long as I've been going there since 1999. So that's and we have a lot of expertise. We have an incredible Cuban guide and staff there, and so we really know how to do this well. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of testimonials of people who've gone on our trips. And up here on the right, these are the students in that high school group, which was just a couple weeks ago. Um, it's 9:47, and I think that is coming to the end of my presentation. I guess there's a couple other things, but I've already actually mentioned these about what to pack, how to prepare, flights, orientation, money. Cuba's cash only because the for Americans because the embargo, our credit cards and banks don't work there, but uh, it's Cuba's a dollar economy right now. They have Cuban pesos, but you don't need them. You can buy everything in dollars, and it's a good exchange rate. It's a pretty much all-inclusive trip, so you won't need much money, but you might find art you want to buy. You might want a extra latte in the morning or some extra mojitos at night, and other souvenirs. We also bring in gifts and donations. We will give advice on that. That's a really great thing to do, and it helps Cuban people greatly. They need almost everything right now. They don't have regular stores, the types of things that we have. They have supply chain issues, and so it really makes a big difference. And we'll go through all that. And You don't need anything special in terms of like clothing or uh, anything that you're going to need. Just probably the same stuff you wear in Florida will work perfectly in Cuba. Um, Other things to know, the internet access is slow and limited. There's not Wi-Fi everywhere, but there is Wi-Fi in our hotels. And we also help you with staying connected to the larger world when you're there. If you need to get your cell phone to work there, there's more specific ways of doing that, which are different from other countries. And we help with all that stuff. So that's why going to Cuba on a tour is whether you're someone who normally does tours or not. Um, Cuba's a great place for a tour, partly because it's hard to get access to all this stuff. It's a confusing country, and there's a lot of amazing things to see there if you have access. Also because it's really complicated in terms of knowing what to do and how to do it. And so that's why, it's kind of the perfect way to go to Cuba's on a tour like this. So uh, so there's more sides here than I remember, but yeah, I've already actually talked about all these things. The trip comes with in-country medical insurance, so you're covered if any emergencies. We've have had emergencies on our trips before. And we have brought people to the emergency room or to clinics and have had great results every time. Uh, and They're easy to get to, and they're all over the place. We even had to find one once in the middle of nowhere. Someone had an asthma attack, and they were treated, and the doctor said if they didn't have get treatment within an hour or two, they might not have lived. So that was a we've had nothing but good experiences with that. And So there, now we're at the end. I guess we have a little bit of time. I can also stay a little bit after if anyone wants to. In terms of any questions, I want to give you guys a chance to ask and talk a little bit as well.
Thanks, Sage. That was wonderful. I really appreciate that. And we do have some questions that have been coming in on the chat and that I know that folks want to ask. So let's start with one around dietary restrictions. I know some folks who are interested may have some allergies or be vegetarian. How does that process work for those with restrictions?
That works well. On the registration form, we ask for um, any types of special needs you have, dietary restrictions. So we get that from the beginning. When we make reservations at all the restaurants, we include that information with the restaurant so they're prepared. And then when we're there, we make sure that we're reminding the uh, waiters and staff at the restaurants about it. But even with all those types of precautions, it's very easy. Vegetarians is It's very easy for vegetarians. Everywhere you go, we have reduced menus. So there's about 3 to 5 options, let's say. Um, because with a group, having everyone, get anything off the menu is too complicated. But a lot of times it's family style. It can be buffet, or it can be where they just ask you, and it's usually between fish, pork, chicken, or vegetarian are the typical options. Of course, there's also lobster and other types of seafood, sometimes lamb, sometimes beef, and other options depending on the restaurant. But you just order what works best for you, and then those usually come with typical Cuban sides like beans, rice, vegetables, um, fried plantains, fruit, and other typical Cuban sides. And then you just basically, it's pretty easy to just select whatever works best for you. They don't cook their beans with in like meat. So the beans are vegetarian, and it never really becomes an issue. If you have a whole lot of eating restrictions. Um, and it's really hard to find food to eat. We recommend bringing supplements um, uh, to so that you have something, a snack or something. But actually, there's a lot of food we get. One of the main complaints that we get, and this isn't something we can really do anything about, but is that there's too much food, and but the restaurants won't give us less food, so there's nothing we can do about that. But there's more options, and then you'll need, and so you just kind of eat what you want.
Thank you. That's perfect. Another question that I know people have that you and I have talked about a little bit is around some of the power outages that happen in parts of Cuba and whether or not that you anticipate that is going to be an issue in Havana.
Yeah, that's another part of the economic challenges I was mentioning earlier that they're having right now. They're having more blackouts than Cuba's always had blackouts. As long as they have these blackouts. They're used to them, and they can be, inconvenient, especially for the Cubans who have to do it on a regular basis. Right now, there's more than there were. There's fewer in Havana. That's part of the reason this trip is staying in Havana because the countryside has a lot of places only have 5 to 6 hours of electricity per day. It's like it's being rationed. Havana's has electricity most of the time and has scheduled blackouts, a few a week, where um, they don't have power. But we work around that because they are planned, and so Cubans work around that. They all know their blackout schedule, and they pl do it, plan it accordingly, and they're so used to it. They've been doing it for decades that they almost don't skip a beat, and you almost don't notice, especially on this tour, since we'll be planning around it. And then our hotels have generators, and a lot of the restaurants and other places we're going to go to, they have generators, and so they um, turn the generators on during the time where they don't have the electricity. So a lot of times you don't even notice. Uh, and it's been in the last year where there's been more blackouts, and we still have had mini tours, and um, people haven't really noticed. They have noticed when we have gone to the countryside where it's longer periods of time. But in Havana, you don't really notice it.
Awesome. Thank you. A question we had in the chat was if there was a maximum number for the group.
Um, let's see. We're the It's really a maximum number of rooms and an ideal group size, which is about 25 people, depending on how many singles and doubles there are. Um, and so we want to have between, I think between 15 and 25 is the size of this group for this tour that we've designed. And we don't want it to be uh, too large or too small, because for different reasons, the tour works best with around 15 to 25 people.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Another question from the chat is something else that you and I talked about a lot, and we're very familiar with being from Florida. If this is during hurricane season, so what would we do if there was a storm headed that way?
Well, if there's a storm, uh, you know, we just it's hard because you never know exactly how it's going to be up until the moment it happens. Last year we had a tour in Cuba where it was I forget it was the biggest hurricane that it hit Florida, and it was in October, this past October, and I forget the name of the hurricane already, but I think it was Ivan or something like that. But it was we had to the first day of the tour, everyone changed the tickets last minute and came a day later, and then we gave the people the option to stay a day longer. So we it's tricky because we have to make the decisions with very short notice, without a whole lot of certainty of what's going to happen. Of course, put any we don't want to push the limit or put anyone or anything in danger. So, we cancel when we have to, or we postpone. We If we've already the Cuban businesses are really good at honoring, you know sometimes they don't send the money back, but they will give us a credit, and then we try to, we reschedule it for another time, or we just figure out the best solution to do, given the circumstances. And we also that's why another reason we recommend everyone get the interruption insurance or travel insurance, because it just automatically covers hurricanes and anything like that that can happen, which is an extra layer of assurance, and protection beyond everything that we're able to do as a tour operator.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Well, I wanted to open it up. I know that we're kind of at our 1 hour mark now, but Sage said he can hang around for another minute or two. So if people want to unmute and ask a question, or if they want another question dropped in the chat and I can read it, we got an expert here, so we can ask our questions. And then Sage, while they're thinking and or typing, would you mind sharing your presentation with me, and then I'll share it with the group?
Oh yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I'm gonna get off the screen
Antonin,
share.
I see that you have your camera back on. Do you have a question?
In terms of traveling, and particularly if not starting in Florida, so I looked at flights. I know there's flights via Houston, and other ways in terms of us getting there. Will you give us a window in
Yeah.
terms of timing for arrival, or are there preferred airlines that you just say, hey, listen, stick to these?
Well, all the airlines that fly to Cuba, which is Delta, American, United. I think there's a couple others that still fly there. They uh, they all they all are fine. I don't really recommend any one over the other. I usually fly American because they have the largest number of flights, and they have a lot of flights from Miami as well. They have I don't know how many a day right now, but I think they have 5 or 6 flights a day, from Miami. So it's really easy. But all the but yeah, we give you the window. This trip, since it's not a long travel day, for most people, we're recommending, or asking people to get their flights to get there in the morning, to get a morning flight, and then their flights going home in the late afternoon, so that we can take advantage of those 2 days. Since it's such a short flight from Florida. But if you're coming from another part of the country too, what I would recommend is, um, well, you could, I would recommend flying to Florida, spending the night there, and then l- spending the night in Miami, and then taking a morning flight, from Miami, um, because we're gonna have a lunch and some afternoon activities on that first day, and then, but if those dates didn't work for you, you could come in on the first day and get there in the late afternoon. We'll pick you up. We pick up everyone from the airport. We'll have someone waiting. We have a car and a sign and everything, and make sure that everything is really easy for you, and it accommodates your schedule. But
No,
yeah,
but
so
that works.
oh,
Starting from Florida, we can always go the evening before to Florida, so that's easy enough.
yeah, and there's a lot of great hotels near the Miami airport, so it's really easy. I do that a lot, as I'll stay the night before Miami, coming from California.
All right, that was a good one. Any other questions for Sage? And oh yeah, Rick, I see you. Okay.
Not a question, just a comment. I went in 2016 with the Florida Trust, And there were two places that we did not get to visit that we're visiting now, which is El Foro, the castle, and the Capitol was under construction, so we didn't get to see that. So I'm really pleased about the opportunity to see both of those places, especially the castle. The El Foro is like the ones in Cartagena, in Puerto Rico, San Juan, and St. Augustine, right? So it's going to be a great trip.
And Sage, when we do our follow-up communications, Rick and I do have a tradition of going to worship at some of our lovely historic churches while we're out. So we'll get the time for mass and all those.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the churches there's amazing churches in Havana, and like you're saying, the Capitol that's been newly restored is incredible. It's really beautiful to walk around inside. Impeccable restoration done on both the inside and the outside, and then the fortifications as well, like you're saying, that you can find in San Juan and Cartagena, and similar ones throughout Latin America.
So thank you guys for that. Any other questions? All right. Well, if you think of any other questions, I'll send a follow-up email with Sage's presentation, a link to the YouTube video so you can go back and watch or share with anyone you would like to, and they can see it as well. So we hope you will join us later in April for our next Lunch and Learn. It's on April 22nd, and it will be Lunch and Learn Tips on Protecting Your Family's Treasures. That will be hosted by Rosa Lowinger. So we will discuss materials conservation and share information and tips on how to restore those items of yours if they are impacted. So that should be a great one. And I just dropped a link in there if you want to learn more about that or register to join us on the next April Lunch and Learn. But thanks again to Sage for leading our conversation today. And thanks to all of you for joining us. And I will hopefully see y'all soon. Thank
Awesome.
you. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.